Ladies and gentlemen, it's your time you're wasting with
Too much.
David Diday.
And Martin Robinson. Martin, that was a lot. Well done.
You asked me to do it like a boxing match, so
I did. You're not supposed to sort of peel back the curtain and let people see those discussions. But I did ask Martin to do it like that, and he did a pretty good job. But I think he just over-egged it a little bit. So if you've got a suggestion for how Martin can improve the opening segment for the next time, I was going to say next week, but it probably won't. We'll probably be a bit rubbish, won't we? Again. Anyway, Martin, how have you been? It's been a couple of weeks.
I've been okay. Yeah, I've been reading a book. I read the whole of Howl by Howard Jacobson, which was very good. And enjoyed greatly. And I've been eating the remnants of chocolate that I've got left over.
Oh, your Easter stash.
My Easter stash of Tony's chocolate or chocolate. What are those things called?
Tony's chocolate.
Chocolonis. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah,
I love them. I love them.
Do you?
Yeah, I keep buying them though, so it's not just Easter. It's just it's an addiction.
Okay. Have you thought about seeing someone about that?
No.
Just Tony.
just Sainsbury's. Yeah.
I didn't get an egg.
So I didn't get an egg.
There's that. Oh, you didn't get an egg. You just went and bought yourself a load of Tony's chocolate. Yeah. Right. Okay. Understood. I'm not a massive chocolate. I feel like maybe
I'm not a massive chocolate, says David.
I think maybe this isn't the show that people have tuned into, but I like a little bit of chocolate. I like a little bit of dark chocolate, a square of dark chocolate with my espresso.
Well, this is what I'm liking here because it's the dark. I'm not going for the milk chocolate stuff. It's the dark chocolate stuff. And also, I'm going to say like and subscribe before we go on.
Like and subscribe before we bore you with our chocolate chat.
Yeah.
So Martin's been reading Howl by Howard Jacobson. You'd recommend that to
I would
all
very
the
much.
viewers.
Yeah.
I'm currently reading John Fowles' French Lieutenant's Woman.
Yeah, that goes way back. When was it written? Actually, because I read it in the 1980s.
Yeah, I think 70s.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, maybe late 60s, 70s. Yeah. But it feels very modern. It feels like it could have been written much more recently than that, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, it's set in the 1860s, and it's self-consciously written as a Victorian novel. But he keeps sort of jumping out of it and saying things like, "Oh, I can't really do this because modernism," and it becomes like a bit of a game. So it's quite fun.
Here's two books we've read. Two books
we've read.
Should they be on the curriculum? Are they?
No.
Why not?
Well, depends what you mean by the curriculum, but I'm assuming you mean the school.
Go on then.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, whose curriculum? Yeah.
No, I mean, for what age? I wouldn't teach John Fowles to. I mean, you could do it. I suppose you could do it. I mean, it might work pretty well for A level, but I wouldn't do it before then.
No, but that's curriculum. A level is part of the curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely. I mean, Howl. The good thing about Howl.
Tell us about Howl.
Well, I mean, it's about what happens to a Jewish head teacher, a primary school head teacher, after the events of October the 7th, with the horrible
the atrocities
that happened in Israel at that time, and what happened afterwards, in terms of how Jews were treated in this country or feeling treated. And it's so multi-layered. I mean, one of the major arguments is with his daughter, who is on a pro-Palestinian march and sees him and shouts in his face that he's a Zio. Things like that. It's got lots of things going on. I'd put it in the curriculum because it covers lots of interesting stuff that are relevant to today.
Yeah. So you'd put it in the curriculum, Martin.
Yeah.
What would you get rid of?
Well, that's right. Yeah. I'd get rid of anyone who teaches blood brothers. I'd take blood
poor
brothers
old Willie Russell. What's he ever done to deserve your ire?
He gets my ire. That he doesn't, but that particular piece of work does. It just, for a start, as a part of the drama curriculum, it seems to have been there for eons.
Mm.
And the fact that it's also taught in some English curricula as well. It
Yeah,
seems
yeah. Well, it's still on the
seems
GCSE
ridiculous.
specs for some
Yeah,
exam boards. So,
I think that's extraordinary. But there you go.
well, yeah. So, I mean, the reason we're talking about this is because this is the plan. This is the plan for today's outing. So, demand and diversity. That's the title of the show that we're going through. What should what should people read? And we've read an article in the TES, haven't we?
Yeah, go on.
On by what's she called? Rachel
Rachel
Fenn
Fenn. Yeah,
from End Sexism in Schools, which sounds like a good thing to do. I think we can all get behind the idea that we should end sexism in schools.
well, it depends
And
what you mean by sexism. I mean,
yeah, well, of course it does. Yeah,
yeah,
of course it does. So her article, and I don't want to trivialise the notion of ending sexism in schools, but her article is very much focused on we can end sexism by making sure there are more women and people of colour represented in the GCSE specifications for English literature.
yeah. But
What do we think of that? Do we think that's likely to end sexism in schools? Is that sexism? Or are
well,
we too male and pale? Well, you're stale, I'm pale, and we're both male.
oh, I
Well,
hope I was going to say we could have started from the anyway. Um, I'm pale. I'm not. I'm not pale. I'm not
no,
pale.
right. I didn't say you were. I said you were stale.
Oh, you're pale.
Yeah.
Well, you're sort of. Anyway, let's not get into talking about. You see, yeah. I mean, well, we could, couldn't we? We could talk about sort of
No, let's not do that.
Irishness and
Yeah.
people of colour and things
But
like
you're
that.
definitely stale, Martin. There's no getting away from that.
Keep going. I'm just going to be. I'm just going to sit here and rot.
So Martin, should GCS English diversify? Should we remove the old faithfuls, or
Well, this is first of all.
does
I
that
mean,
mistake representation for significance?
Old
What's
Faithful, who's a geezer
geezer?
in
Yeah.
America, isn't he? Old Faithful, but
Right. Oh, yeah, not a geezer, a guy.
a guy's a geezer. Yeah,
Yeah, a guy's a geezer. A
geezer
geezer with a
geyser.
Y. Yeah.
Um,
Should we replace English with geezer?
yeah, geezers. But you see, that's straight into sexism.
Yeah,
We've got
I know.
this
I
is
know.
falling apart very
It's
quickly. This
fallen
whole,
apart. And I guess the bigger question sort of underlying that is, do we think, is it important to give children access to a cultural inheritance, or, and and we've been here before, Martin, in some of our discussions,
yeah, God,
that the idea that should the curriculum be, more a mirror or a window?
people can first of all. I mean, we can point people towards one of our most popular podcast episodes, and that's our interview with E.D. Hirsch. And
Yeah, back in the
back in
day
the
when we
day,
did
chatting to him
interview.
about cultural literacy and things like that. So there are various arguments about cultural
There are.
inheritance and what the cultural inheritance is for and for whom. So is it the cultural inheritance of the world, the cultural inheritance of the West, whatever that is, the cultural inheritance of the United Kingdom, or the cultural inheritance of Englishness, whatever
Yeah.
that might be, and what English literature as a whole also represents. And
Yes.
do we count things like translations of Homer as part of our inheritance, and translations of the Bible as part of our inheritance, or do we just talk about things originally written in the English language, and then things like Beowulf, of course, which were written in the English language, but that we wouldn't recognise as the English language.
Yeah.
So all sorts of questions come into what an inheritance is, doesn't it?
Yeah, all of those are interesting. I think, the idea, particularly, you mentioned the Bible there, and so one of the things that you could argue is a cultural inheritance is the King James Bible, which obviously was written in English. It is a translation, but it's a great work of English writing, and that it's had more impact on the phrases, the words, the idiom that we use, the language that we use today than Shakespeare. And it's far less likely to be covered in a school curriculum than Shakespeare. And is that good? Is that okay? Is that something that we're concerned about? Maybe, maybe not.
And you could also argue that the Book of Common Prayer should be part of that as well as hymns, ancient and modern, if you want to go the full hog. But couldn't that be part of the RE curriculum as well?
Well, no. I mean, so that's it. I mean, I would say no. So in the English curriculum that I've written, I've included the King James Bible, and I've had conversations with people in the past, so, where we've gone down a route where people have said like, oh, well, if you're including the Bible, shouldn't we have, the Quran or something like that? And of course, my response to that is that the Quran's got nothing to say to English literature. Whereas the Bible is pretty foundational to lots of aspects of English literature, and the on one
And
level,
that particular version of the Bible.
and that particular version of the Bible has a particular impact on English language, yeah. And so it kind of earns its place on those merits. It's nothing to do with religion, and there's a whole body
Well,
of
that's the
scholarship
problem, isn't it? Because
looking
it
at the
obviously
Bible
it
as a
does.
piece of literature.
It
And
also does have something to do with religion. I mean,
yeah, and so the
you can't
RE
take that
curriculum.
away from it.
Well, you can take it away. I mean, I think that's the
No, but
interesting thing
right. Well, if you can, and then you're treating it death of
as
the
literature.
author, death of all the authors,
Yeah.
and saying it has nothing to do with the
Well, of
people
course, we don't
who
want to
it's
say it's
written
got
for
nothing
or
to do
by.
with it, but you can detach it from that and say we're not teaching it as a religious text. We're
No, I
looking at
understand. I understand what you're saying.
yeah,
I'm
of
just
course you
saying,
do.
should that be the way it is treated as just
In an English curriculum,
any old stuff written by any old geezer down the road?
yeah, in an English curriculum, I think it's absolutely right that that's how it should be treated if you're going to include it. Whereas if you're teaching it as part of an RE curriculum, then you wouldn't do that. You'd want to be teaching the religious significance of
So,
the.
so hang on then. So religious significance is different to literature significance, but
It's
therefore, what's cultural significance? Isn't that both those things together, or what would it be?
It probably is. It probably is. But I'm just talking about if you're going to include the Bible in an English curriculum, then you have to very deliberately move away from thinking and looking at it as a religious text, and you have to be very explicit about that with children as well. Like this isn't. We're not doing it for that reason. We're not interested in that. We're looking at its literary and linguistic
And
significance.
I get that. I'm just wondering if you can actually do that. If you can take
Yeah, you can.
you can talk about Our Father just straight away. We're mired in all sorts of controversies. Our Father, who art in heaven. So Our Father, the prayer that we're told to say every day. Our Father, tell me about it. How,
It's a metaphor, isn't it?
it's a metaphor for what?
Well, it's a metaphor for God.
Well, so there you go. So you can't avoid that, can you?
No, no, you can't. But if we're too, if yeah, okay. Anyway, so we
No, but
could,
I mean, it's a
yeah. So let's sidestep that because this is a pit trap which would consume the entire episode, which
yeah.
may or may not be interesting to the listeners. Let's just we can come back to it if you determine, but let's
No,
let's
no,
think about
go on.
Rachel Fenn's argument in the
Yeah.
TES argument. We'll put a link to it, won't we, Martin, in the
When
description?
he says "won't we, Martin," that's
Yeah.
passive aggressive for "won't you, Martin."
Sorry, it is. It is fair, 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 fair. So her point is that there's essentially relatively few books studied, particularly at GCSE. I'm just going to little quote here. Teachers consistently make the same choices from the set text list year after year, no matter what new choices are added. Her point is there's no point adding in more diverse choices, more works by women, if everybody just continues to choose the same stuff. While these old faithfuls, there we are, there's your phrase, remain on the set text lists, it makes no difference what other texts are added because teachers simply won't choose to teach them. and we've got a little stat here that she uses. In 2024, only 5% of students across England and Wales studied a whole text by a female author, while even fewer studied one by an author of colour.
Yeah.
So is that a problem?
It's interesting. I mean, there was a figure I saw at the quiz show the other day. Was it Mastermind or something like that? I don't know, or one of these. But it was 2% of people in the no,
Come on.
which year? Well, I think it was the 2020s, 2010s, something like that. Studied at GCSE female authors, something like that. So yeah, why was it?
So
Why was it?
are you saying that the percentage has got smaller?
Sounds like it. Don't know.
All right.
But anyway,
Okay.
it was only 2% anyway, so it's not very big. But the thing is, what do teachers choose to put on the
Well,
curriculum?
so I mean, one
It's
of the
what's in
things
the
that,
stock cupboard is number one,
no,
isn't it?
I mean, obviously
What
that
I
has a
what
bearing.
I can remember
But why
teaching,
does, yeah,
what
why does
what
stuff
I
get
know.
in the stock cupboard is the other thing. And so these days, in most schools, teachers don't choose what they're going to teach. That's
Yeah,
chosen for them.
yeah.
So I think it's the wrong level of description to say teachers are choosing these things, because very often it'll either be a head of department or increasingly somebody at a trust level
Hmm.
is making decisions for multiple schools on what needs to be taught. So by far the most popular three texts for English literature are Macbeth and Inspector Calls and
Of
oh,
Mice and Men.
Christmas Carol.
Ah, Christmas
No,
Carol.
not of
Not of
Mice and
Mice and
Men.
Men.
No, as we'll move on to the influence of Michael Gove shortly.
Oh
But
yeah, of course. Sorry.
yeah, Michael
Yeah, of
Gove
course.
famously got rid of banned of Mice and Men. I
Well,
remember
American
seeing Michael
texts.
Gove speak. Yeah, exactly. I remember seeing Michael Gove speak at Wellington
Hmm.
years ago, and somebody asked him like, "Why do you hate of Mice and Men?" And he said, "I don't. I love Mice and Men. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. I just don't think it should be the only book that children study in as part of their GCSE." And he sort of had this whole spiel about the fact that at that time you could apply similar statistics to say that that was the most widely read book in school, taught book in schools, and there are all sorts of reasons for that. One of which, probably the most important of which, was its length. It's pretty short, and he said he wanted to do something about that. So, in order to tackle that, that whole strand of what could be studied, the inclusion of American literature as part of the specifications was addressed. But we've got exactly the same issue now with students studying of this still incredibly small sample
Hmm.
of English literature.
And
Just
and again, short. The
yeah,
shortest
and short
Shakespeare.
and
The
length
shortest
being yeah, length being the most important criteria for selecting text. So the
and
Victorian novel.
easy, perceived
Well,
easiness. They're
I
going to
don't
get
think
good grades if they do this. They'll get good grades.
I don't. I mean, I think that's a bit simplistic, but and I don't think it's necessarily right or fair to say that either A Christmas Carol or its closest competitor, Jekyll and Hyde, are easy. I think lexically they're challenging for sure.
But
There's
would the
lots
teacher
of
choose something longer? Sorry, would a Matt choose something longer and something perceived to be more complex and less easy to pass in the exam than these things? I mean, even if it's sort of the Matthew effect or whatever, saying this
yeah.
text is easy, all teach it, all teach it. I mean, I mean, Macbeth is relatively easy.
It's one of the shortest Shakespeare plays,
It,
Macbeth.
well, it's because they missed out a whole act, apparently.
Oh, did they? It was
Well,
a six-act play, was it? Not.
no. But there's bits of what happened to Lady Macbeth is the big
Oh,
mystery.
really?
Yeah, there's big scholarship about
Oh,
what happened to Lady Macbeth because she goes from
really?
being quite
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
to being completely
Yeah, yeah, completely different.
yeah.
that was all excised from the text at some point.
Well, lost perhaps.
Lost, yeah.
the
Oh,
great lost
fascinating. I didn't know
parts
that.
of.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there indeed you go. So, so would they? What are you saying? Sorry, what was your question? Would a school, would a trust choose a longer text?
No,
No.
in other words, if we're saying we should have more female writers, more
Yeah.
writers of color, we should have, everyone should see themselves in the curriculum, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Should the argument go rather than that, this to people at that level?
Yeah.
Look, this is an easy text. It's short.
Yeah.
You'll get good results.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Shouldn't that be the thing they want to hear? Is will our kids get better results this way?
Well, earlier you were lambasting Blood Brothers.
Yeah,
That's pretty easy.
I know. I'm not saying I agree with this argument. I'm
No,
just
it's
saying,
and it is
isn't it a way of
interesting.
arguing to that level, which are bureaucrats making
Yeah.
bureaucratic decisions based on data that they want to get the kids get better
Yeah.
results, so their schools is seen in a better
So
light? That the
one of the
argument isn't cultural, it isn't
yeah yeah
intellectual,
no
it's
no no no
actually bottoms.
yeah.
The bottom line is
I think that's
numbers.
I think that's I think that's interesting. So obviously, Blood Brothers is still available on some GCSE specifications, and some schools still teach it.
Yeah.
And the rightly or wrongly, the general perception appears to be that it's not easier to do well with Blood Brothers because it's too simplistic. It's not challenging enough. There's
Hmm.
not enough for students to write about in order to sort of access better grades, and it's probably not true. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but the decision might be for many people that JB Pre-Season Inspector Calls presents a bit of a sweet spot in that it is more demanding, it is more challenging, it is richer, but it's still easy enough.
Hmm.
And you're right that sort of easy enough pressure with the way in which exams are used to hold schools to account for their effectiveness is absolutely always going to be leaking into these kinds of curricular choices. And unless you, in some way, separate the way you hold schools to account from specification choices, that's always going to be the case.
Hmm.
It's
So
always going to be a race to the bottom.
it's not necessarily knowledge rich that we're looking for then.
Not when it comes to GCSE. No,
No.
no. But let's bring old Michael Gove back into it for a second. So he, rightly or wrongly, you're welcome to the variety of opinions out there on him, but he was pretty keen for one, for a couple of things. One, that children studied romantic poetry, and secondly, that they studied a Victorian novel. Now, prior to the change in the curriculum that he oversaw, nobody taught Victorian novels. I say nobody, somebody
Hmm.
did probably,
Hmm.
but it was exceedingly rare that children would encounter Victorian writing. It was exceedingly rare that they encountered romantic poetry, and the it's always the case that when you specify something, when you give people a narrow range of choices and say you must pick from this list, then that absolutely expresses itself in the lessons, the curriculum that children experience in schools. So
But if you're asking people to read the Victorian novel, surely that's
yeah,
going to bring a flood of female writers into the interview.
well, it absolutely could, isn't it? But if we really cared about children accessing the best that has been thought and said, we probably wouldn't be giving them A Christmas Carol. We probably wouldn't
No,
be giving them Jekyll and Hyde. We might be thinking about how on earth can we get them to read Middlemarch or something
Middlemarch.
like
Yeah.
that.
Well, famously the best novel ever in lots of
Well,
lists
one of
of
my favourites.
greatest
I love
novels
it.
ever.
I
Hmm.
love it. I'm a huge fan of Middlemarch. I doubt I'd have loved it as a 15-year-old.
Hmm.
I remember I didn't study it, but I remember it was fairly common for people to do Silas Marner as a
Hmm.
GCSE
Yeah. Yeah.
text
God,
some
yeah.
years ago, and
Catcher in the Rye.
Oh well, that's
Anyway, I know. Sorry,
we're
shut
getting
up.
confused. Yeah.
I know. I'm not talking about 19th century novels. I'm talking about what I studied at school.
Oh, did catch you on the right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I
let's
mean,
move on.
and yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think Catcher in the Rye is a good thing to read at that age, arguably. But obviously, it's not good to
Just go
explain.
back to Middlemarch. Anyway,
Go back to Middlemarch. Yeah.
yeah, if you're talking about literature that is based on the subject,
Yeah.
this is a great novel, and you
Yeah.
want them to read the best that's been thought and said, and you want a bit of variety of the gender
Yeah.
of authors, the sex of authors, should I say? Then seems like a
Seems
shoe
like
in.
a winner.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's a beast. It's a big book.
it's
There's
a
a
big
lot in there.
book.
It's pretty sophisticated. The some of the storylines are kind of going to be quite opaque. The whole kind of Dorothy stuff, marrying the dry old priest, Cazubon, all pretty, potentially inaccessible, difficult to kind of to understand her motivations as a young person, perhaps. For her to be the heroine of that novel, I think takes maybe an older, more experienced reader to kind of appreciate, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, I wouldn't choose Middlemarch
So we
as a
wouldn't have the best novel in the English language there in the school curriculum. We can't do that because it's too
Oh, we
complex.
can do it, but I
No,
think
we do.
it's
They'll fail.
unlikely.
They'll fail their GCSEs
It's
because
like, well, whether or not they fail their GCSEs, what I would worry more about is that they'd fail to appreciate one of the best novels in the canon, and
right.
it would
So
potentially poison the well.
right. So there's an issue with teaching the best that's been thought and said in that we need to teach things that open up the world of the best that's been thought and said to kids
Yeah.
sometimes, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of putting it, Martin. Yeah, that's lovely. So, I would want to give children, go back to the thing that you were saying earlier about, should children experience the Bible and Chaucer and Beowulf and all that sort of thing. I would really like children to experience those things in digestible chunks. So, giving them a term on Paradise Lost is unlikely to be satisfying for teacher or student,
Hmm.
but giving them
I did
snippets.
that. I did
Did
that at
you?
school.
Did you do a term on Paradise Lost? Good grief!
Yeah.
How did it go? Did you love it?
No.
No.
No. And
No.
it was one of those books that had the translation on one side and the
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's. I mean, that's a really difficult challenge. Even the rhythm of it, the way it's arranged on the page makes it hard to kind of follow the sense. I think with Paradise Lost. Anyway, I mean, it's great, and I really want children to have an experience of it and to know that it exists and to have a sense of its importance within
Right.
what we call
Can
in.
we just talk about that then?
Yeah,
Because doing a term on any book seems
yeah.
a very disconnected way of approaching a literature course anyway.
I
I
think
don't get a
so.
sense from my term on Paradise
Yeah,
Lost. Number one, I was doing it wasn't we weren't doing any sense of chronology. Fair enough.
right.
We weren't doing any sense of genre, of
No,
type, it was just taught to us because it was a text on the syllabus. We had to do
right.
it. Is there a way of telling stories about stories, if you like? Is
Yeah,
there
of
a way of
course.
connecting the curriculum together in such a way? So you're talking about snippets, which worries me as well, because
Yeah.
then there's the whole books thing, isn't there, that
Yeah, yeah,
people
there
argue
is. There
about?
is the whole. Yeah,
So,
of course there is.
so we're just endless worksheets, around things that make it even more complex. How do we solve all this thing about breadth and depth and
Okay. Well, the way I would
yeah, yeah.
resolve in an English curriculum is to have anchor texts which tell a broader story about literature.
Come on then. I mean, it's what such as give us an example.
Well, okay. So I think a really nice one is to give an access to the idea of heroism and where that came from and mythology and all of that thing is to look at the Odyssey.
Right. Okay.
My
Hang on. Well,
preferred,
straight
my
away, we're
preferred.
well.
Hang on, hang on,
Is that
hang on,
English
hang on,
literature? Is that
hang on,
English literature?
hang on. My preferred translation or my preferred adaptation of that is Simon Armitage's radio play, which is called Homer's Odyssey. And so it is a work of English literature. It's written by a poet laureate, and it's it's earthy, it's funny, and it gives access to the stories and the texture of the Odyssey without trying to do anything similar to a line by line translation or anything
No,
like that.
there is a
And then and
there are
then that's an anchor by which you can read with children. They enjoy it. It's very lively. They have a lot of fun with it. You can make that a class reader. And then at the same time, you're using that to say, well, look, here's how Odysseus looked at that. Let's look at a snippet. Let's look at an extract from Gilgamesh. Let's look at an
yeah
extract from Beowulf. Let's look at how other texts have broadened our understanding of these of
yeah.
these things without having to sort of beat ourselves over the head with something which is really difficult to get our
Okay.
heads.
So importantly, I mean, there's three texts we talked about in in a, in a degree of depth, and that
Yeah,
is the Bible, the
yeah,
King James version,
yeah,
the Odyssey, Simon Armitage version, and Middlemarch. Middlemarch, we decided we can't put in the curriculum because it's too much. The Odyssey, however, which isn't English,
yeah,
but his version is. King
yes,
James Bible, I mean,
yeah,
it is English, but based on a text that isn't English either. So but these are things that perhaps are set in the idea of what the West is, the great books of the West, and the Western literary tradition.
yeah,
But you then zoomed over to the Epic of Gilgamesh as well,
yeah.
which again,
Not
was
English.
that written before the Odyssey? Do we know?
Oh God, yeah, that was written sort of about sort of. It's the oldest work of English literature that we've got access to.
English literature.
Sorry, literature. The
Yeah,
oldest, the oldest work of literature
yeah.
that we know
So,
of. There may
so
be older
in
ones.
terms of diversity, we have a story which is diverse anyway in terms of where literature comes from as
Yeah,
an art form. It's very difficult to draw borders and boundaries around it and say it belongs on this island. Is that
yeah.
right or
Oh,
wrong?
well, I think it's not right or wrong. It's something that you can do, and you have to. The curriculum is an act of drawing boundaries around things and saying this much. This
Mm,
is what we're going to be focused on. So it's if we've made the decision that we're going to draw a boundary around literature and say we're going to look at English literature, that's a reasonable thing to do. Literature written in English, and if you're going to look at literature written in
hang
other,
on, can we just say that again? English literature isn't English; it's literature written in English, which is a different thing.
yeah, it's different to like nationalism, yeah, for sure,
Well, I
yeah,
mean
yeah.
that's one of the issues people.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
so
perhaps Gove was drawing, kicking the Americans out for probably.
well,
Well, you could argue for good reason.
yeah. So I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have made that choice.
Mm.
I think that was you know, but the trade off is you know going back to that. Do we want? Would we rather if gun to our heads? Would we rather children read Steinbeck or Dickens? Maybe we should be. Maybe some people would say, yeah, maybe Dickens is a better bet. Maybe others wouldn't.
Right. But okay, but we're still arguing a lot about books written by men. I mean, the only one we've really talked about by a woman is what was her name again?
George Eliot.
I'm joking.
Yeah, yeah.
She gave herself a man's name to
She
write it.
did give herself a man's name. Yeah, I can't
Um,
remember her
there you
name.
go. You've written her out of the thing already.
I
So I mean,
know.
but why
I mean,
why
I do
not?
know it. I just
Why
can't
not?
remember.
Should now it's popular again. Wuthering Heights.
Yeah,
Should we
yeah. I
should
mean,
we
so
show them the film and
Wuthering
then
Heights,
disappoint them with the book? Or
Wuthering Heights. I think would be. That. So anyway, going back to Rachel Fenn's argument,
Hmm,
is not her point is that you don't just add stuff to the specification list
you
because
have to take things out.
you have to take things out. And that's exactly what going back to Gove, that's exactly what he did. He removed the opportunity to choose, for exam boards to choose American literature. So Of Mice and Men was no longer an option.
Mm.
And so lots of schools sort of started thinking, well, where else can we study it if not at GCSE? So in many cases, it got read in Key Stage 3. Whether or not that's appropriate, is a different matter. But if you remove things, if you no longer allow people to make certain choices, then you create the opportunities for certain new things to come to light. And there's what we know, I think, with the current way in which schools are held to account, is that schools are always going to be incentivized to select the most digestible, the most teachable texts, and that often is similar to the shortest.
And affordable.
Affordability, I think, is less of an issue, and because I think that as soon as something becomes part of an exam spec, publishers make it available. That's not the biggest barrier, I don't think, although it is an issue. So, were we to say, were Bridget Phillipson to say, okay, so I'm going to make a diktat here that, for instance, you've got to choose. It's not enough to say Victorian novels. I'm going to make exam boards specify Victorian novels written by a woman. For instance, then all of a sudden the exam boards are going to be racking their brains to go, okay, well, we've got Wuthering Heights, we've got Jane Eyre, that's the Brontes covered. Let's not do Tenants of Wildfell Hall. We don't want her. There'll be a process of gathering together. Can we chuck in one of the, can we do Mill on the Floss? All of that sort of stuff will get
Right.
Will get.
But all those all those texts you're talking about, and people, who argue that, well, actually we should go for the best that's been thought and said, this should be our way in. They can't argue with a 19th century novel written by a woman being on the syllabus, on the exam board syllabus, because they are bloody good, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, they are. They are good.
So that argument is easily sorted by just stating, yeah, there should be a 19th century novel written by a woman on the syllabus. Why not?
Well, you could do that. That's what I'm saying. You could do that.
No, I know. I know you're saying that. I'm agreeing.
What would happen, though, still, Martin, is people would not be looking at which one of those was the best, or their criteria for the best would be which is the shortest.
Yes, yeah, which is what we get with the Dickens. I mean, that's what we got. So then we get into the quandary of what the bureaucrat wants, what the teacher wants to be able to teach, etc., etc., etc. But basically, it's, if we can get Dickens' Christmas Carol there, why not have whichever Jane Austen you want to put there? I could persuade you to put
obviously
on
not a Victorian novelist, but no, absolutely. And
she's not Victorian. Go on. When was she writing then?
She was writing the 18th century.
Bloody hell, she's older than me.
She's older than you. She was writing against the backdrop of the Napoleonic War, Martin.
Oh, she's that old. Bloody hell, see?
I know.
She should be in there.
Napoleon?
Yeah, she should be in there. So,
she should.
Then we've got Victor Hugo and all that as well. Then, haven't we? We could have.
They're not. And what about writing in English?
What about Vanity Fair?
What about Vanity Fair? Becky Sharp, yeah. Obviously written by a man.
Yeah, I know. Let's move on.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm just showing that I do know some novels.
Okay, all right, let's do that.
Just to cover my embarrassment of getting the wrong.
Okay.
Not doing it very well. I have read a book.
And then the other thing that that I think the Rachel Fenn argument is making us think about is that we also need to specify, if we want to change things, we need to specify texts written by people of colour. And the counter argument is, are we saying that we want children to read people of colour for the sake of reading people of colour? Or are we saying that there are works written by people of colour that qualify as being part of, representative of, some of the best things that have been written?
Right. And also how those things fit into what the conversation is in the curriculum.
yeah,
So you've got Heart of Darkness
not written by a person.
by Joseph Conrad.
Yeah,
But you've got a book written famously in a sort of response to that, written by a person of color, with
yeah.
the title
Chinua
that's
Achebe
which with a title taken from
from
a
Yeats.
poem.
Yeah,
And you could put all those three, talking about story of curriculum,
yeah, no,
you could
no,
put those three texts together, and you've
yeah.
created an interesting story to tell about curriculum
And you have,
and
and if I was telling that story, I'd also want to tell it alongside maybe Toni Morrison, who wrote about both of them. And yeah, absolutely, you could absolutely do that. Um, so again, were we to were we to take out the option of having an inspector calls and instead, have a strand of the exam which gave schools only a choice of books written by certain writers. We could then have lots of passionate intellectual arguments about where we put Chinua Achebe and Toni Morrison and James Baldwin and all these other great people that we might want children to have some experience of. But again, we'll be picking the quickest, won't we?
you've got to, right. So there's the pragmatist that comes along and says, but we've only got a certain amount of time to teach, and if you want a
Yeah.
certain amount of breadth, you're going to have to teach novellas, almost, really, novel or short
Well,
novels or novellas, really.
and there's definitely people who would like short stories included as part of that, and for that to be, and I think the short story is an interesting form. There's people that say we should be doing short stories with children because they have to write stories in as
Mm.
part of their GCSE English language, and I think that's not a fantastic argument because they don't write stories; they write sort of little vignettes, little pieces of description that sort of have the form of a story, but they're not actually emulating short stories by great short story
Isn't
writers.
there
But anyway,
isn't there an argument they should be reading short stories anyway, in terms of that
yeah,
it
and there's some
teaches so
fantastic
much
ones.
about story structure in a
Maybe so.
digestible amount, rather than here's Middlemarch on day one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
he- here's
On day
here's
one, read Middlemarch. Yeah,
well,
day two, War and Peace.
we start off with Hungry Caterpillar, don't we, or something like that, Eric Carl's book,
I remember
and then end
reading
up with
a great book, Martin. Did you ever read? You were probably a bit old for it. The Diary of Adrian Mole.
I read that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I was too old for
Oh,
it.
well, I was 11, I think, when that came out, so it was
No,
perfect
God.
age. Yeah, I know, and I loved it, and I remember not really kind of getting it as an 11-year-old, but there's a moment where it's like, I don't know, April the 6th started reading War and Peace, April the 7th finished War and
Finished.
Peace, quite good. Which is a good joke.
It is great. It is great.
Yeah,
And yeah, you could see that was done. That could be done in a school curriculum. By just saying, here's the abridged version of War and Peace.
yeah,
Cut out the
yeah, yeah.
philosophy. Cut out the
Cut out all
wars.
of that.
Bit
Yeah,
of Pierre and Natasha, and off we go.
off
Um,
we go.
Bit of Andre, perhaps,
Bit of not too much.
and General Kutuzov.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, him with the one
My
eye.
favourite bit, and again, you'd cut it. My favourite bit is the characterization of Napoleon
Ah,
because he's like a figure of ridicule in it.
no, surely
It's a
not.
great comic characterization. Yeah, it's fantastically done. It sort of presents selfishness and sort of lack of self awareness in this sort of brilliant way. But you would definitely cut it if you were just giving people the bare bones of the story.
That's it. But a synopsis a synopsis for a novel is a great way in,
See,
of
see,
course.
this is. I mean, synopses have their places, but this is the argument for snippets. So,
Hmm.
that were I teaching Great Expectations, and I think there's an argument for teaching Great Expectations. If you're going to teach Dickens, it's, I think, probably my favourite. But I would gloss lots of chapters. I would select chapters and I would teach them, and I would provide glosses for others.
And
And one of the ones,
would you call it smaller expectations?
yeah, no, I would call it low expectations. Yeah, absolutely. One of the chapters, if I was doing that, one of the chapters I would gloss. I can't remember which chapter it is now, but there's a great chapter where Pip goes to see a production of Hamlet, and it's it's brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Do you recognise it?
Go on,
Do you know what I'm talking about?
go on. Yeah, go on.
So it's just hilarious. It's like a really bad production of Hamlet with somebody, I can't remember the character in it, but somebody playing Hamlet. And it's terrible. And Dickens is having a lot of fun taking the mickey out of bad Shakespeare. And I would absolutely include that as a snippet,
Hmm.
in somewhere else in the curriculum. I think it's a great piece of writing.
Well,
Great piece
or
of
you could do Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and that snippet.
or for instance. Yeah. Yeah. Because it all, because that shows, or it goes towards showing the relevance of Shakespeare to
Hmm.
English literature.
Hmm.
That's the point that Dickens is kind of is thinking. Oh, people will appreciate this joke because they all know Hamlet,
Hmm.
and of course, no, they don't.
So what? So what have we got then? We've got the possibility that you could teach within what the parameters of the best that's been thought and said. We're arguing about what the best is,
Yeah,
saying you can't actually necessarily judge it, and the pragmatist who's going to
yeah,
say you can't quite put it in the best. So with a
yeah,
wider idea of what the best is, you could choose books by people of color, by women, and you could put it in there and actually satisfy all these different pulls on what the curriculum should hold in some
yeah,
way. It's not like you're taking out Shakespeare and putting in something written last week by somebody.
yeah,
But there is this other argument that people should see themselves in the curriculum.
yeah.
And
Windows and mirrors. Yeah,
this becomes something, I think we've discussed this before, becomes something slightly more difficult to ascertain exactly what you mean. Because at what level are we saying see themselves? If I say,
yeah,
right, you see yourself in a curriculum as a bloke, then anything written by a bloke is okay. Yeah, if you see yourself in a curriculum as a woman, then anything written by a woman is okay. But it isn't quite just
yeah,
saying
yeah,
that,
yeah.
is it? Because it's saying,
No,
right, we've got
it's interesting, isn't it? So you talk.
subcategories and
You,
lots of other
we
people.
mentioned we mentioned there briefly Vanity Fair.
Hmm.
So written by a man, Thackeray, about a woman, Becky Sharp. An interesting characterization. Would you reading that sort of read it as, oh, I'm seeing myself as a man because Thackeray wrote it, or would you be, I'm seeing a characterization of a woman? Is that enough? Does it matter who wrote it as much as what it's about?
Yeah, and well,
Uh,
I mean, I find it easier to talk in the abstract slightly about this.
okay,
I'm reading Eric Carle's Hungry Caterpillar, to a
are you
caterpillar,
enjoying it?
and, and it's very hard. And the caterpillar, I'm not a
You're no
caterpillar.
longer in the abstract. You're very
No,
concrete,
I'm
Martin.
not a caterpillar. But yeah, but so do I see myself as a caterpillar there, or as a butterfly? What happens if I'm a moth, or if if I'm an ant,
Or a
or a
child? Yeah,
spider, or something else? Can I actually sort of read certain things which are completely not
yeah.
me straight away, but actually sort of, oh,
Is
this is
Animal
quite,
Farm a representation of man or pigs?
yeah, I mean, how far do we have to go down this thing about saying I need to see myself there? Particularly if at certain levels of identity, you've got 30 kids in your class, you've got 43 different identities,
Yeah, yeah,
possibly
yeah,
going on. I mean,
yeah.
it becomes an impossible thing to do to actually see representation either in the story, let alone in the writer.
No, and so yeah. So there's always going to be a loser in that argument. Is that
And
what
it's
you're
always
saying?
that person in the corner there who's
Yeah,
losing.
it's always
That's
the
why they have
least
to sit next to the
represented
teacher.
person. Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. We should
I'm not in
we should
this.
try
I'm not in it
better.
at all.
I know. Yeah, I'm an Inuit. Where am I? Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, Martin. There's no. I I think that. that I would want children to believe, to think, to feel that the curriculum they're encountering speaks to them, is relevant to them. It makes them think about who they are and why they are where they are, and why they think what they think. And I would like them to take from it that there's a possibility that they can do things that they might not otherwise thought of doing. And so I think that if a potential risk might be, that a child might think, only white men write books, therefore that's not something I would consider for myself. I would want to challenge that. And I think you can do that relatively straightforwardly. And I think part of the way that you can do that is by supplementing longer texts with a huge breadth of extracts. I would definitely encourage
which tell
that.
the story, and
Which tell a story, which
they're
piece
joined
together
together in
a
in
story.
terms of curriculum, in terms
Yeah.
of the concepts behind what you're teaching, and you're showing different
Well, this is this
genres
is
and
the this gets to the heart of my kind of grievance about what English literature becomes. So it becomes less about English literature and becomes more about PHSE. And if you want to teach a literature curriculum, then the worst way to do that is just one text after another.
mm,
That I would want children to have a story about what is English
yeah,
literature,
yeah.
what is included, what isn't included, why isn't it included, what are those boundaries, why did one thing lead to the other, why do English teachers care so much about novels, why didn't novels exist at a certain point in time? Why were
Okay,
poems, you
can we
know,
just put one other thing about that story though, because there's the story of English literature, and then there's the story that some people want it to tell, which is the story
yeah,
of Englishness.
Englishness? Yeah,
And
yeah.
is there a distinction there in your mind?
Of course. Yeah, I'm not interested in the story of Englishness. That can get in the sea.
And swim to
And
France.
on Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, look, all of that. Because we wanted to. We also this week we listened to or read a piece about Michael Gove on Harry Fletcher Wood's site, didn't we? Improving teaching about which is so about another politician who worked with Gove, but it's about Gove. I can't remember the details of it now. And so there's a few quotes from that which I'm just going to read to you, Martin. You can respond to this.
Oh,
So
okay. Go on then.
yeah, no, you'll like and you can do it in the voice of your choosing. So you can
Okay,
do it
thank you.
as Michael Gove if you'd like to, or
No,
the
I can't do
boxing
Michael Gove. Go on.
presenter, or any other voices that you're capable. You're good at an Olivier. Do one of the
No, I'm not going
that.
to do. Anyway, get on.
So we're not being ambitious enough for our young people. That was famously from Gove. We're not being ambitious enough for our young people.
You
If
want
our
me to respond
exams,
to that? Because that's very much the view at the time, wasn't it? And this was
yeah,
this skills versus knowledge,
yeah,
trad versus prog argument back in the day. When is it? 2010 or whenever it was, around that sort of time. And now we're finding the problems of our ambition, if you like, is that it results in everyone's reading A Christmas Carol.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and
Tiny
arguably
Tim.
arguably is a better thing than everybody reading Of Mice and Men. Here's another one. What we want an exam system to do is tell the truth and shame the devil.
Well, there you go. I think that's slightly out of context, obviously. Who is the
And
devil
it's
in this picture?
Yeah, the devil's bad teaching, isn't it? It's bad curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, you're throwing things that anyone could say at any particular time, really, can't you? I mean, the platitudes we call these when they're
Well, those are a bit platitudinous. They are sort of representative of a point of view. But here's one which I think we could maybe get into a bit more, where he says our literature is the best in the world. It
right.
is
Right,
every
there you go.
child's birthright, and we should be proud to teach it in every school.
Yeah,
Now, that I think we're less on board with.
I think we've got to say that anything that bigs up Britain in that way, saying it's the best, better than
Yeah,
anyone else's, is that's Goethe
it's
thrown out.
uncomfortable, isn't it?
Goethe is thrown out, including, Sophocles is
Yeah,
thrown
yeah,
out, and these have been influences upon us
yeah.
in this country,
Of course.
So
Yeah,
and what about, does that count? What about the Irish
yeah.
writers, who perhaps
Not
were
interested in them.
against their will part of the English tradition at one point?
Yeah,
Um, you know,
or certainly British. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No,
as under
absolutely.
British, yeah.
So I would be always uncomfortable with any kind of notion that we should be saying to children in schools that the literature of the English is the best in the world,
It's
or
certainly
even,
it's
or
certainly a
even,
rich heritage. You could say it's a rich
yeah, there's lots of
heritage to
great stuff.
draw upon.
And I think you can, you can make a case to say that Shakespeare's has what, if not the one of the most internationally influential writers. I remember having a fascinating conversation with uh, a, a German academic who was arguing quite convincingly. I was really interested in it. I can't remember the details of it, but the German translation of Shakespeare is better than English Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was at an international drama competition in
Oh yeah,
Hanover, and the opening speech was being done by the mayor or someone who was speaking in German,
yeah,
and it was being translated alongside into English, because the majority of people, the language of the conference
yeah,
was
yeah,
was English,
yeah.
and the German mayor decided to quote Shakespeare, and of course. The bloke who was translating hadn't been
Oh,
told about this whatsoever. So the
really?
translation
Oh,
from the
days.
German into English was hilarious and completely unrecognizable.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, it's completely unrelated. I remember being at a thing a long time ago now in Russia, where there was some simultaneous translation going on, where
Yeah.
I was saying something like I can't remember, but my boring shtick, and the translator would translate what I was saying into Russian, and everyone would laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, but he was talking
Oh,
about
what
you.
on earth has he just said?
Look at
It's
this
very
idiot.
disconcerting, that.
Oh dear. I had to do on live television in the
Yeah.
Czech Republic a
Oh,
drama
really?
lesson. A drama lesson, and the translator,
Hang on, how did that happen?
I know, and the translator was caught up, so he didn't arrive until
Oh, yeah.
15 minutes into this
Okay.
fecking program. So I had to do that in mime. So we did
Oh,
mime for 15
yeah,
minutes,
nice.
getting into it. Brilliant,
Like
I mean,
Marcel Marceau.
God knows how many people were watching it.
No one. I
And on this note, I think we
Yeah.
should bring it to
I think we should just give up.
a our forays into Eastern Europe.
I
Yeah.
wonder, like viewers, listeners, if any of you can track down from Czech TV a recording of Martin doing mime live on Czech TV, we'd very much like to hear that.
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, it'd be silent, but we'd listen
Yeah, but a silent
attentively.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
there we go.
listen, as always, a complete waste of everyone's time, but you were warned.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see
Uh,
you next time.
next time. Thanks very much.
Au revoir.
Ta ta.